I have been seeing something lately, and I am wondering if you have noticed it as well. I have mentioned before that I like to read the news while I am eating my lunch. I am on the socials occasionally. I haven't really been posting, but of course, I'm still just paying attention. I'm paying attention to what is being said. I'm paying attention to posts. I'm paying attention to some of the funny reels that I enjoy seeing. And I have been noticing lately that not only is there talk about the importance of strength training in women in perimenopause and beyond, but there is talk about lifting heavy and lifting heavy weights. Now, as a personal trainer, this is a really easy thing for me to compute, process, and move on because I understand about strength training. I help people strength train and I lift heavy. But I got to thinking, if I was a woman who was trying to take control of my health, my body had been changing a lot over the last few years, whether it was because it was in perimenopause or because I've already transitioned into menopause, and I'm just trying to do all the things, as they say, I would be so overwhelmed at the continuing messaging of lift heavy, because this is what I would do in my head. I would think, okay, you want me to strength train? All right, but my body has been changing. I get hurt more often. I'm afraid of getting hurt. I'm afraid of doing it wrong. I don't want to injure myself, even if I'm not already injured, because sometimes when I get out of bed, I tweak my back, or when I stand up from being in the car after several hours, I'm hunched over for the first few steps. And I would just work myself into this frenzy of, I don't even know what they're talking about, and I don't trust my body to lift heavy, and so I'm just not even going to do it at all. Now, I don't know if that's how you are or if that's how your brain works, but that's how my brain works. I wanted to come on today and talk some about this concept of lifting heavy, talk about what it means, what it really truly means. And because this is what I do, I'm going to get into the weeds just a little bit, but bear with me because then we will zoom out and we'll talk about how to apply this concept of lifting heavy or just strength training in general to you and to where you are. So in today's episode, we'll talk about what lifting heavy means. We'll talk about the framework for which I train my clients. We'll talk about getting started, what that means, and then really why lifting heavy, or what's called max strength, is important for women in our age and stage, and then just some other considerations for women who are in perimenopause and menopause. So if you feel like you don't know what to do with the term lifting heavy, or know what that means, or are overwhelmed by the thought of that, even if you aren't fully sure, then this is the space for you today. So first of all, what does lifting heavy really mean? The first thing I want to say about lifting heavy is that's going to be relative. That is going to be based on you, how long you have been strength training, if you have been strength training at all, what your natural musculature is like. Are you naturally able to lift more, or do you have a frame that doesn't hold as much muscle? It's really more about the challenge level than it is about a particular number on your dumbbells, barbells, bands, etc. And we'll talk about all of that kind of stuff later. The fitness industry can make things really challenging, especially right now. The wellness industry can make things incredibly challenging. And if you don't believe me, then you can go back and listen to The Wellness Industry Has Lost Its Mind back in season 23. It's been one of my most popular episodes in the past year or so. Unfortunately, the health and wellness industry is not great about making things clear cut. Actually, this is kind of good because this means that it allows us to use our own discernment and take into consideration what we need for our uniquely created bodies, because God did not create one prototype. And so, of course, one particular number or a certain number of reps is not going to be universal among everyone who's doing the same movement. There is a scale that I think is helpful. It's called the RPE scale. So that's rate of perceived exertion. And that's a scale from number 1 to 10. So 1 is like you're really hardly doing anything. 10 is maximum effort. And lifting heavy typically falls into about an 8. And I'm going to use a lot of vague terms here because, again, all of this stuff is relative to you. Dr. Stacy Sims, who is one of the voices who I listen to because she focuses only on women, she calls it an RPE 8, which is rate of perceived exertion of an 8 out of 10. And this is a high level way of explaining it. If you can do 10 reps of something and after 10 you cannot do any more, then an RPE 8 means that you would be stopping at about an 8. So RPE 8 means you are working at about an 80% intensity and you have about 2 reps left in the tank. So you're not going until total fatigue, but you really couldn't go much more than what you've been doing. She explains it like, okay, I could do 2 more reps if my life depended on it, but I don't really want to. So when we take this back to what does lifting heavy mean, in general, that's kind of what we're shooting for. We want to go until we only have a couple reps left in what we're doing before we fatigue. This is not to say there's no benefit in getting lighter reps and doing 20 to 25 reps of that. If you have participated maybe in like bar classes, they will have more of a focus on that type of lifting. Again, there is benefit to that, but that is not necessarily what lifting heavy means. And I'm going to tell you here in a little bit about this whole concept of lifting heavy and how it is so beneficial, even more than just from a strength perspective for women in our age and stage. And if you'll indulge me for just a second, if you are thinking, "Ooh, I don't want to lift too heavy. I don't want to bulk up." This will not happen. Okay, I actually took an entire chapter in my book, Your Worthy Body, called I Don't Want to Bulk Up, which every chapter is a rule or a myth to break. And that is one of them. You won't get bulky. You might gain some strength, but I promise you, you're not going to get bulky. It takes a lot of dedication, both in the gym and in your nutrition, in order to get that way. And we, in this graced health space, are trying to feel and function our best as we get older. The term I like to use is grandma goals, but you can call it whatever you want. So we're not talking about like bulking up and getting into a fitness competition that takes way more effort than I've ever been interested in doing. We're talking about having the strength in our bodies to be able to move the way that God is calling us to move. I want to back up some and tell you just really quickly about the agency in which I am certified and their model for having trainers like me train other people. I received my personal training certification from NASM, which is National Academy of Sports Medicine, and I specifically chose them for what they call the OPT model. That's Optimum Performance Training Model. I liked it because it was a stair-step approach that guided clients into achieving their goals with lower risk of injury and with the concept of figuring out your form and slowly growing stronger rather than throwing yourself in a gym or throwing yourself with a trainer and doing a bunch of weights or reps or anything else that your body's not ready for. So I really liked this OPT model. Really quickly, the OPT model has 5 phases. Phase 1 is stabilization endurance. So if we take those 2 words out, that is basically working on the inner parts of your body, a lot of core work, and doing that for a while, doing that for a certain period of time or reps. So that is your like 12 to 20 reps. When you do the bar classes, and I'm not picking on bar, I'm just using them as an example, but when you do your bar classes and you're doing 15, 20 reps of a movement with a weight, then that is stabilization endurance. Phase 2 is strength endurance. So that is when we start to add some weight. We start to do 2 to 4 sets of something, and our reps are around 8 to 12 reps per exercise. So as we go up the OPT model, then our reps start to decline. Phase 3 is hypertrophy or muscular development. Basically, this is the phase in which your muscles will actually grow bigger. So they can grow stronger without hypertrophy, but they will grow bigger in the hypertrophy phase. And that is doing, again, a little bit more sets, like 3 to 6 sets. And you're doing about 6 to 12 reps per exercise. And so I want to back up really quickly. So in hypertrophy, maybe we do 8 reps. And there's some overlap. If you're like a numbers person and you're catching with me, strength endurance is 8 to 12 reps, and hypertrophy is 6 to 12 reps. So let's just take 8 reps. So where are you at those 8 reps? And that's where you want to be at that 80%. So that means that when you hit that 8th rep, you really only have 2 more left in you if your life depends on it. We'll do 8 squats that pretty much fatigue us. We'll take a break, or I like to be efficient. So then I would like add in my push-ups, and then we would go back to those squats, do 8 more squats, go do some more push-ups, and then 8 squats again. How many push-ups are we doing? Well, that depends on the goal and what your fitness level is for push-ups. So that's kind of a different conversation, but I hope you're following me here with the phases. So there's the stabilization, endurance, lots of reps, strength endurance, that's phase 2, fewer reps, phase 3, hypertrophy or muscle development. So that's when we're doing more sets and then fewer reps. Then we get into phase 4. That's max strength. That is 85 to 100% of what is called a 1 rep max, which is what can you do only one time. And this is what a lot of reels and videos and everything else are made out of. It is people doing a Romanian deadlift one time and dropping it and walking away like they owned it. And good for them. Wherever they are with that, getting to a 1 rep max is a big deal. And you should be proud of wherever you are with that, especially if it's something that you have been working toward. But keep in mind, that is phase 4. That's not something you want to go into right off the bat. If you are in a program, or if your child is in a program where they bring you in and do a 1 rep max just to get your baseline, in my opinion, my very conservative, I don't want you to get hurt opinion, I think that's aggressive, and I don't think that that is safe. But of course, you and your trainer know you best. With that max strength, you are doing 85% all the way up to 100% of your 1 rep max for 1 to 5 repetitions, meaning that you can only get 2 or 3 reps out. You can only get, it's 1 to 5, right? So I could go through the examples on all of those, but that is how intense and how heavy you are lifting with that max strength. And then phase 5 is power. And I'll be totally honest, I don't do a whole lot of stuff in power. That's just not my goal. That's not my client's goal. That's like when you see the clean and jerk and they're pulling up the barbells and going into a squat and popping it up and bringing it down and throwing it down, all that kind of stuff. That's just not in my wheelhouse. So I'm not going to talk about it, but that is phase 5 power. Again, phase 5. It's a stair step. So that's not something that we're going to jump into really quickly. We're going to go from the inside out of our body. We're going to get those strong intrinsic stabilization muscles and get those strong and then work our way out. I like this model because it makes sense. And to me, it's the safest way to strength train. At our age, safety is something we need to be concerned about because we just don't pop back into place as quickly as we used to. It doesn't matter what it is. It just takes a while. So I want to be safe and I want you to be safe. And anything that we do together, I'm guiding you to be safe. Let's talk some about the different types of resistance training because I think that can be confusing and maybe a little overwhelming as well. Obviously, you have your body weight. Whatever your size, God gave you a body that can withstand some squatting and some pushing and all of the other things that we can do with our body weight. So body weight exercises are a great way to start, especially if you haven't been strength training in a while. You can do dumbbells. Dumbbells are the weights that you hold in your hand, and I want you to envision someone or have that visual of someone doing a bicep curl. More than likely, the visual that you get is someone holding, it's like a little piece of bar with 2 pieces of weight on either end. It's, depending on the size, it's 10 to 12 inches long. That is a dumbbell. Barbells, on the other hand, are longer. So some barbells are going to be more like 5 or 6 feet long. I don't really know how long they are, but they are long bells that you put the weights onto. You'll see these more when people are doing chest press or sometimes squats, which I refuse to do squats with barbells because it hurts my back and I'm just not going to do it. Anyway, you have the option of just saying no to any modality, and I will say no to squats with barbells. That is another modality, a type of resistance training. There's also machines where you walk in, it'll show you the muscles, oftentimes of what you're going to use in that machine, which I think is really helpful. The bigger the muscles, the more bang you're going to get for your buck, because you'll also probably do some smaller ancillary muscles. And so I think those are great. It's funny, I was talking with a neighborhood friend one time, and she said, Amy, I've been working out with a trainer and I love her, but she keeps having me do kettlebell swings. And she was like, I hate the kettlebell swings. There's something about them and I hate them and I don't want to do them. She said, you know what I really want to do? I just want to do the machines. And I said, well, then go do the machines. Tell her you want to do the machines, or maybe you can figure out the machines. Like, if that's what you like, let's go way back to the 80s and maybe mid 90s, where there was like that Curve fitness for women. That was all machine based. And you know what? That could absolutely be a great way to strength train. So I come in here not saying there's one that's better than the other. The one that's best for you is the one that you'll actually do. And the final modality that I would offer you is resistance bands. Resistance bands are longer. They're often about 3 feet. They've got handles and they stretch. I love resistance bands. And these are what I actually choose for my Strong and Vibrant at Home course. The reason I love these particular resistance bands that I suggest when people join the course, but I like these particular ones because they have interchangeable handles, which means you can put more than one band on. As you get stronger, you can put 2 bands on. I have a client, we do 3 bands all the time. And so you have all of these bands in one handle, and it just ergonomically, it works and it seems to make sense. I also like resistance bands because it makes it easier to do pulling exercises, which are so important to us, especially as we get older, as we're trying to prevent osteoporosis. We're trying to keep our muscles in our back so our posture stays upright. And so I love the pulling. And the particular brand that I like, and it's just off of Amazon, and they're like between $40 and $45 typically. They're not much, but the ones that I really like also have fabric over it because these don't last forever. I've had 2 sets. They last about 5 years or so. And when they pop, then they're popping, but they're staying within the fabric, and they don't like come up and pop you and give you a whelp on your face or your belly or something like that. So resistance bands can absolutely be a great modality to use in your resistance training. Again, the most important thing is finding what you like and stick with it, because it doesn't matter what it is. If you only do it once or twice and then fade out because you hate it, it's just not worth doing. Now, the caveat is I think it is good to mix it up a little bit, but when you're just getting started and you're creating a habit of strength training, then do the one that you like the best, period. Now let's talk about this concept of lifting heavy. So remember, that's the max strength, and that's getting up there into 1 to 5 reps. And I'm going to tell you right now, I do practice max strength on my own sometimes. Going back to what I just said about like, what do you like and what keeps you going? I don't love it. Like I kind of like the feel of lifting really heavy, but I also don't like the inefficiencies of lifting something heavy 3 or 4 times and then hanging out for 60 to 90 seconds. To me, I just feel like I'm wasting time. That's just me and my own demons that I got to work out. But I do max strength. I don't do it all the time, every time. So as I am telling you this, I want you to think, does this make sense for me? Does this sound interesting? Or does it sound like something I would not stick with? The most important thing is that you are doing some sort of strength training, okay? But I want to explain the lifting heavy and why it can be beneficial for women in menopause. So we're going to get into the weeds here. Just stick with me for a second because I think you'll find this interesting. We have 2 types of muscle fibers. Type 1 is called slow twitch, and that's more of your endurance. So if we go back to the OPT model, that's more of like your phase 1, maybe a little bit of phase 2, where you can do something for a long period of time. That's also endurance activity, like running a marathon, or if you're holding a plank, or if you're walking. That type of stuff is type 1 slow twitch fiber. Then we have type 2. That's your fast twitch. That's your power fiber. Those fibers are the ones that they contract, they work really quickly and forcefully, but then they fatigue faster. So I want you to think about more like sprinting with that, or lifting a really heavy weight, but you can only do it a few times. Most people are born with about 50-50 slow and fast twitch fibers. Of course, this varies by individual. But what happens is we start to lose our fast twitch muscle fibers faster as our estrogen declines. If you think about these fast twitch fibers being your power fibers and the ones that move really quickly, guess what? They're also the ones that will keep you from falling when you trip and like you have to catch yourself. It helps you move quickly and adapt quickly. And these are the things that we want our body to be able to continue to do as we get older. Heavy lifting, that max strength, 85 to 90% of your max, is one of the very few ways to recruit and maintain these type 2 fibers. So your light weights don't recruit and don't use these fast twitch type 2 muscle fibers. When you are going to bar, again, I'm not picking on bar, I promise. I think it's a great class. But when you go there and you're lifting light weights, 3 pounds up and down, up and down, up and down, times 20, then you're not recruiting any of those type 2 fibers. Another element of this max strength is how it can be helpful to your bone density. So when we had estrogen, and I know many of us are in this perimenopause phase, so we're having the estrogen, but it's up and down and all over, and it's everywhere, as we know from our moods. Or if you're like me. But if you are fully in menopause, then your estrogen has totally declined. Estrogen was protecting your bones, and now it's not. Now, I did an entire episode on our bone health and strength training's impact on it, and it was called The Bone Battle. No one is talking about how strength changes everything. That was back in season 23, episode 9. So I'm not going to talk about all of that again, but basically when we are lifting heavy, when we are having a lot of force, pull our muscles away from our bones, then that will help our bones strengthen. So that is the very, very, very high level of that episode. But I would really love for you to go back and listen to that if this is an interesting episode to you. And of course, there are some metabolic benefits to lifting heavy as well. And I have to just pause and say, I know that we are a weight neutral podcast. I called it a weight neutral podcast because I do believe that we can be healthy at any size. At the same time, I don't know about you, but I'm human and I do care about my metabolism. And while I don't want to put all of this diet culture stuff on there, yeah, if there's something I can do to kind of keep the engine running a little faster, I'm going to do it. And I think that that is beneficial to my overall health. I'm not talking about a body size. I'm just talking about keeping the engine running well, running efficiently. So I don't think I can skip over the benefits of lifting heavy for women in menopause or perimenopause without talking about the metabolic benefits. Heavy lifting helps increase your what's called EPOC, that excess post-exercise oxygen consumption. So E is for excess, P is for post-exercise. It's a little confusing. O is oxygen and C is consumption. So basically your metabolism is continuing to churn at a slightly higher level several hours after you do that because of the intensity that you required your muscles to work out when you were lifting heavy. You will absolutely build lean muscle mass. That is metabolically active. So when you build more lean muscle mass, then yeah, your metabolism is going to be a little bit higher, which can help combat that metabolic slowdown that can often happen in this age and stage. But that is often due to sarcopenia, which is when our natural loss of muscles. So let's try and keep those muscles up and try and keep them active. So what's the best way to lift heavy? Well, we're going to focus on compound movements. I call them functional movements as well. Those are your squats, your hinges, like your deadlifts, your pushing, your pulling, and your single leg stuff. So if you are like stepping up onto a box, if you are walking and doing walking lunges, those are all compound functional movements. They also mimic what our body does in everyday life. So what better way to prepare ourselves to feel and function well by in the gym doing the movements that help us. One of my favorite reels I have seen recently is a woman, and she was doing this kind of strange little, it was a little bit of a hinge and a little bit of a squat. And she was grabbing, what was strange about it is she was grabbing this enormous kettlebell with both of her arms really close and coming back up. And this woman was probably in her 70s. And so the first thing in the reel that we see is we see her pulling her arms in and lifting up this kettlebell and putting it back down, and then walking back up to the kettlebell, lifting it up, putting it down, walking away. And then it transitions to what she was training for. She had a daughter with special needs who was in a wheelchair. And so this 70-year-old mom was taking her 50-year-old daughter and transferring her from the bed to the wheelchair, and then back from the wheelchair to the bed. I kind of want to cry thinking about this. I wasn't expecting to feel this way. What better way and example of training for life than this woman was doing? It's so inspiring. And that's the kind of mindset that I want us to have of let's train for life. So it's those compound movements, it's those functional movements, your squats, your hingings, your single leg stuff, your pushing, your pulling, not a bunch of bicep curls or tricep extensions. And I'm fine with you doing those as long as you're also doing those functional movements. Okay, tear jerking, aside. Okay, so how to lift heavy. Your functional movements, compound movements, however you want to call them, you want to do about 3 to 6 reps at about 85 to 90% effort. I want to reiterate what I said earlier. This might be something that sounds interesting to you. If you are afraid of it, then I would recommend getting a personal trainer to guide you through it. Or if you just think that's not how I want to work out, I'd rather do something with 12 reps, then do the 12 reps, okay? This is not one or the other. This can be both and. This can be, I'm just not going to right now, but I'm just telling you what all of this lifting heavy, what this actually means. When you do your reps, your 3 to 6 reps, then you want to rest between 2 to 3 minutes between sets. If you're listening carefully, then you will say, but Amy, a second ago, you talked about not wanting to wait between 60 and 90 seconds, and that's not 2 to 3 minutes. And you would be right, my friend, because I do not have the patience to wait 2 to 3 minutes. And technically, because you're really trying to refuel those muscles in between, you don't want to be doing anything else. So if you've done my Strong and Vibrant program, you know that I like efficiency. I have said that. In fact, I even got a comment from a user who said, sometimes you say that so much, it kind of makes me anxious. And yeah, that's fair. That's fair. But I don't want to waste anyone's time when we're working out and we're not doing max strength in Strong and Vibrant. We're doing more like phase 1 or phase 2, that stabilization endurance or strength endurance, because that program was designed for women who know they need to strength train, but they don't know what to do. And so I am getting you in, and I'm getting you in a habit of strength training. And no, it's not like total heavy lifting. And that's okay, because that's not where we want to start when we are starting with strength training. If you don't know how to strength train, then this is the program for you. We don't do heavy lifting. We don't do max lift in there, because that's not the intent of the program. But you want to do that heavy lifting. And I have said 3 to 6. Some people say 1 to 5. You know, the research that I have pulled have given me both. So let's just say 1 to 6. Okay. So 1 to 6 reps. And we'll do that between 3 and 5 times. So that's a set. So how many times do you do that? That's a set. And then really you just want to do that between 2 and 3 times a week, because you've got to recover and you've got to refuel all of those muscles in between your strength training. And I want to pull back and just kind of do a quick mid-episode recap of we're doing these max strengths because we are wanting to stimulate our muscle fibers so that they can respond like we want them to respond when we have to move quickly or adjust unexpectedly. And then also for our bone density, so we can continue having strong bones and so they don't weaken. This is not meant to be like this bodybuilding competitive mindset, which there's nothing wrong with if you choose to be in that space. It's just a physiological way of supporting your body as your hormones are fluctuating. Also, to reiterate, you don't get here overnight. This is not something I want you stepping into. This is for the listener who has been strength training for a while and feels like maybe she needs to do something different. Or if you were one of my participants in Strong and Vibrant at Home and you're like, okay, I'm ready to do more, then I want you to start thinking about how can I increase the weight with the movements that we do in there. Many of these movements are able to be performed with the resistance bands that we use in here. You just have to be intentional and you have to have an intent for the movement that you're doing. If you decide you want to step it up and start lifting even heavier, I do want you to keep in mind a few things with regard to recovery. So, as we age, everybody's favorite 3 words, without the estrogen that we typically have, then our muscles will take longer to rebuild after strength training. And as I'm saying all of this, I realize the question may be, well, what if I'm on menopause hormone therapy? What if I am on the estradiol patch? My understanding is our body is not going to see these physiological side effects that I've talked about if you are on some sort of menopause hormone therapy, meaning that this may not be as critical for you if you are on hormone therapy. But still, more than likely, the levels that you have with a patch are not going to be the same as when you were 20. And I say a patch because that's what I use. Whatever you are using, you're following me, right? I think you are. Anyway. But still, I think in our age and stage, we can still say these things are more true. We do have slower muscle repair oftentimes because our estrogen has declined. It takes longer for our muscles to repair. You may find that you have increased inflammation. We are also making less progesterone, which means your body may stay in somewhat of an inflammatory state longer after your workout. Again, if you are taking menopause hormone therapy, also known as hormone replacement therapy, but technically HRT is like if you are in early menopause because of a hysterectomy or something. So trying to use the correct terms here, y'all. Work with me. Menopause hormone therapy. If you are taking progesterone in any way, then this won't apply as much to you, but keep in mind, obviously we have sleep disruption. No one needs to talk anymore about that. We all know that, and then, of course, our stress responses are changing. Our cortisol patterns are shifting. That can make us more sensitive to training stress. And then our joint stiffness is affected as well. Estrogen helps maintain your joint lubrication. And so if you are not having any estrogen and you're not adding any more in, then that can mean more aches and pains. So what does that mean for heavy lifting? Well, it might mean you need to take an extra day in between heavy sessions. If 3 sessions a week is too much, then knock it back to 2. And then instead of maybe doing strength training on Tuesdays and Thursdays, maybe do it on Mondays and Fridays or Mondays and Thursdays. Like, play around with it. There's no formula. So play around with what feels right to you in this season. You also need to have your active recovery weeks, or a deload week, as some people also call them. Those are doing things like my Be Complete that I have. Those are doing things like really taking the intensity down, doing more stretching, doing more smaller muscle group, like what I call the mini muscles. That's going to be more of your stabilization endurance, that phase 1, but going back and going down the stair step for a day or 2 or however many you need in order to not do as much and let those muscle fibers repair. I also want to remind you that your heavy weight may be different from session to session, and that's okay. Like, we're going for a range, okay? We're going for that intensity, that fatiguing. That number doesn't matter quite as much. You got to listen to your body more. And I know this phrase has thrown around, and I talk about it a lot. And sometimes it can be confusing of what our body is trying to tell us, but pretend like you're talking to your friend, or maybe if you have a trainer, and if you don't have a trainer, then make up what that trainer would be like. And if you need a visual, like, think of me, like, what would I tell you if you're like, I used to be able to lift this, but now I can only lift this. And so then your trainer hypothetical name Amy would say, well, are you getting to that like 80%? Are you getting to the point where you're fatiguing with only like 2 reps left? Well, yeah, but that's different every time. And then your trainer would say, well, that's okay. What's the intent of the movement? I'm sounding really goofy here, I know, but let's not get too focused on the numbers and get more focused on what your body is responding to and how it feels, not only in the movement, but also after the movement. And I do feel like I need to remind you that if you are going to lift heavy, do not walk into the gym and start lifting heavy. Warm up. I take a solid 12 to 15 minutes to warm up almost before any workout. That's just how much time I need. And I don't call it wasted time. I just call it prep time. And it gives me the confidence to do the things that I'm asking my body to do. Another thing to keep in mind is this concept of periodization. Now, I talked about this back in season 23, episode 9. It was called Seasons of Strength, Adapt Your Workouts Through Summer and Beyond. And that talked about the concept of periodization, which is basically changing up your workouts every now and then. It's okay to change up your workouts. I shared earlier that I do max strength sometimes. I'm really not doing it much right now, but you know what? Maybe once my kids get off to school and I'm in a bit more of a routine and more of a rhythm, then maybe I'll get back to that for a few months and then maybe I'll step away from it. I don't know. I don't really have a plan. I probably should have more of a plan, but the point is we can change things up. That's okay. And the other thing that's going to be a little bit of a teaser for next week is increasing your intensity, otherwise known as progressive overload. Did you know you can make your resistance training harder without adding weight? It sounds strange, but you can. And actually next week, I'm going to come back and tell you how to do that. So I'm giving you a little bit of a cliffhanger, but I want you to come back next week because if you are using the same weights that you've always had, maybe you have like your 5 and your 10s and your 12s at home, and you're like, I don't want to buy any more weights, but I want to make things harder. I'm going to tell you how, and that will be next week. So be sure to come back next week. I hope this clears things up in terms of what heavy lifting means. And again, I hope that beyond anything else that I have said today, that you realize that lifting heavy things is the most important thing. Are you getting to 85%? Well, do you want to? I mean, yeah, there's benefits to it, but that doesn't mean that you have to do that. But I wanted to take today's episode and just kind of clarify what lifting heavy means. The most important thing is that you are doing something to strengthen your muscles as you age. Because if you don't strengthen them today, and if you don't challenge your body today, then everyday tasks will challenge you later. When's that later? I don't know, but they will. So let's take the time, have the intention of strengthening our muscles, which will also help our bones, and let us be the women that God intended and created us to be from now until when He calls us home. I know I mentioned a lot of different episodes in today's episode. So if you want to go on a rabbit hole and join me for some of those, make sure that you check out the show notes or the episode description, and I have links to all of those. Also, did you know that I have a cheat sheet on how to protect your vulnerable areas with strength training? So you can go to gracedhealth.com/essentials and download exercises to help our 4 most vulnerable areas as we get older. And then you can listen to that episode again. It is in the show notes. Also, if you enjoyed this episode, would you do me a favor and do one of 2 things? Number 1, share it with a friend. Personal recommendations on episodes mean so much, and we trust our friends. So if you have someone you love who you think this would be helpful to, send it to her. Number 2, a rating and review, especially on Apple Podcasts, but really wherever you listen, is incredibly helpful. If you can take just a minute and give it as many stars as you think it deserves. I mean, 5 is great, but if you don't want to do the 5, that's okay. Or if you are watching on YouTube, give this a thumbs up. Like I said, next week we will be talking about how to lift with more intensity without adding weights. So basically how to lift heavier when you don't have anything heavier. I'm really excited to share this one with you. I've been wanting to do this for a while. Okay, that is all for today. Go out there and have a great day.